Thank you for clicking on this video. Welcome, friends. I never thought I'd end up in a place like this. The heavy clang of the iron gates behind me echoed through the corridor, sealing my fate. The air was thick with the stench of sweat, bleach, and something darker, something hopeless. My footsteps felt too loud as the guards led me past rows of cells, each filled with men whose eyes followed me like predators watching fresh prey. I kept my head down, trying not to make eye contact. But I could feel it, the weight of curiosity, the hunger for weakness. I wasn't built for this place. My crime wasn't violent, but in prison, no one cared about the details. You were either prey or predator. And I wasn't sure where I fit in yet. Cell B14, the guard barked, unlocking the door with a clank. He shoved me inside and I stumbled forward. The door slammed behind me, leaving me face to face with my new reality. There, sitting on the bottom bunk, was a man. He looked up slowly, and his eyes locked on mine. Dark, unreadable, but not cruel. His jaw was sharp, his arms tattooed with faded ink that told silent stories of a rough past. He didn't say a word, just studied me, as if deciding whether I was worth acknowledging. I cleared my throat. "Hey, I guess I'm your new cellmate." No response. He simply leaned back, arms crossed, eyes never leaving me. It was unnerving, but oddly grounding. As if he was letting me know that panic wouldn't help here. Silence was safer. I dropped my duffel bag on the top bunk. The mattress was thin, barely more than fabric stretched over metal springs. I sat down, exhaling, trying to ignore the pounding in my chest. Finally, he spoke. His voice was deep, calm, controlled. "Name Ethan," I said. My voice cracked. "Yours." He hesitated for a moment. Then Marco. That was all. Just Marco. No welcome, no threat. Just a name. The first night was the hardest. The sounds of prison life never stopped. The laughter, the distant fights, the occasional scream. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, every nerve on edge. At one point, I heard Marco shift below me and I froze, afraid he'd say something, or worse, do something. But instead he muttered, almost to himself, "Relax. Nobody's going to touch you while you're in here with me." It should have scared me. But strangely, it didn't. It felt like a shield, a promise. I fell asleep eventually, holding on to those words. Morning came too soon. Breakfast was watery oatmeal and stale bread. I carried my tray carefully, avoiding the groups of men who claimed tables like territories. I felt completely out of place, like blood in the water. Then Marco appeared. He slid his tray down across from mine without asking, his presence alone enough to make the men nearby look away. "You eat here," he said simply. "Don't wander." I nodded quickly, grateful for the silent protection. For the first time since I arrived, I didn't feel like I was drowning that evening. Back in the cell, something happened that would stay burned into my memory. I was in the shower, block rows of men under dripping pipes, steam clouding the air. I was nervous, clutching my soap like it was the most valuable thing I owned, and then it happened. The soap slipped, fell to the wet floor with a small splash. I froze. Every story, every warning I'd ever heard about prison life flashed in my head. My heart hammered. Behind me, someone chuckled. Well. Fresh meat dropped the soap. I swallowed hard, not daring to bend down. My mind screamed at me to leave it, to just walk away. Then I heard footsteps slow, heavy dash approaching before anything could happen. A strong hand reached past me. Marco. He picked up the soap and pressed it back into my palm. His voice was low, steady. "Don't believe every story you hear. Not everything's like the movies." Our eyes met for a brief moment, and I felt something shift. Not fear, not pity. Something else. Something I couldn't name. That night, I lay in my bunk, staring into the dark, my thoughts circling endlessly. Prison was supposed to strip you of humanity, make you hard, make you numb. But somehow, Marco's silent, unreadable. Marco was the first person here who made me feel seen, and I knew this was only the beginning. The days that followed, blended together like gray paint, strokes identical, suffocating, and endless. Prison wasn't just about the steel bars or the guards barking orders. It was about survival. Every hallway was a test, every glance a warning. You couldn't walk too slow, couldn't look too long, couldn't speak too much. For me, it was hell. I wasn't built like the others. No tattoos that told a story, no scars to prove I'd earned my place. I was soft in comparison, an outsider. And everyone knew it. The first fight I saw happened during lunch. A tray clattered to the floor, and before I could blink, two men were on each other like wild animals. Fists pounded flesh, chairs scraped, guards yelled. I froze, my spoon halfway to my mouth. Marco's voice cut through the chaos. "Keep eating." I turned to him, wide-eyed. "Are you serious?" "Yes," he said without looking up. His tone was calm, almost bored. "You don't stop. You don't stare. You don't flinch. That's how you make yourself invisible." I forced myself to lower my gaze, spoon trembling in my hand. He was right. Around us, other inmates either watched with cruel fascination or ignored it completely. I had to learn to do the latter. Back in the cell, I finally asked, "Why are you helping me?" Marco glanced up from the book he was reading, an old, battered paperback. His eyes studied me like they had that first day. "Because you're not going to last a week on your own, that doesn't answer the question." A faint smile ghosted across his lips, but it vanished as quickly as it appeared. "Let's just say, I've seen enough people chewed up by this place. Don't plan on watching it happen again." It wasn't much, but it was something. Despite his warnings, prison still chipped away at me. The food was barely edible, the noise constant, the nights filled with shouts and banging metal. Showers were a gauntlet. Walking the yard was like entering an arena. I felt like prey every second of the day. But Marco was different. He didn't talk much, but his presence was a shield. Nobody messed with me when he was nearby. At first, I thought it was just fear, his tattoos, his build, the aura he carried. But the more I watched, the more I realized it was respect. People stepped aside not just because they feared him, but because they trusted him. That trust began to rub off on me. One evening, after a particularly rough day where I nearly got cornered in the laundry room, I slumped onto my bunk, burying my face in my hands. Marco set his book down. "What happened?" "Some guys." My throat tightened. "They were waiting for me." If the guard hadn't walked by, Marco's eyes hardened. "Names?" I shook my head quickly. "No, I don't want to make things worse." He studied me for a long moment, then leaned back. "Smart, but you need to learn. In here, weakness is an invitation. You show it once, they'll come back." I let out a bitter laugh. "Then I'm screwed. Because all I am is weak." Silence filled the cell. I half expected him to agree, to tell me I was hopeless. Instead, he said quietly, "Everyone is weak when they first get here. Even me." I lifted my head, stunned. Marco, weak? The man who seemed untouchable? He didn't elaborate, just reached under his mattress and pulled out something unexpected. A small, folded sketch, drawn in pencil. It was of a dog, sitting patiently, tongue hanging out. "My sister used to have one," he said softly. Back when I thought I'd see the world outside again, I stared at the drawing, realizing for the first time that Marco wasn't just my cellmate or protector, he was human. And in a place like this, that humanity was rare. Trust didn't come fast. It came in pieces. A word of advice here. A seat saved at lunch there. Silence shared during long nights. I began to notice the little things how. Marco always positioned himself on the outside during meals, so I was shielded. How he subtly nodded at others in the yard, invisible negotiations that kept me safe. How he never asked for anything in return. But the biggest shift happened one night when I woke to shouting down the hall. A fight had broken out again, this one brutal. Guards rushed in, batons swinging. I sat up, trembling, heart racing. Marco stood by the bars, watching. His body was tense, his fists clenched. "Why do you care?" I asked from my bunk. He didn't turn. "Because fights like this, They decide who makes it out and who doesn't. I swallowed. And us. Finally, he looked back at me, eyes steady. Us. We keep our heads down. We look out for each other. That's how we make it out. For the first time since arriving, I believed maybe I could survive this place. Not because I was strong, because someone had chosen to stand beside me, and in a world built on fear and violence, fragile trust was more powerful than anything else. Nights in prison were never quiet. Somewhere down the hall, someone always shouted. Metal banged against metal. Sometimes it was laughter. Sometimes it was rage. But tonight, as I stood in the showers, the sound that echoed was the hiss of water hitting tile and the hollow thud of my heartbeat. I hated shower time. The tiled room felt less like hygiene and more like a hunting ground. The steam was thick, voices carried, and eyes lingered longer than they should. I'd perfected the art of finishing quickly, avoiding everyone's gaze and slipping out unnoticed. At least, that was the plan. The soap slid from my hand, bounced against the wet tile, and skidded just out of reach. For a moment, the entire world froze. I stared at it, heart hammering. That stupid cliché, the one every prison movie joked about, suddenly became my reality. Behind me, I heard low chuckles. A pair of guys near the corner muttered something I couldn't catch, but I knew it was about me. My face flushed hot. Problem. A voice called. I hesitated, my throat dry. The soap sat there like a trap. Bend down, and I'd look like prey. Leave it, and I'd look weak. Either way, I lost. Then a shadow moved beside me. Marco, he crouched casually, snatched the bar of soap, and pressed it back into my hand without missing a beat. His voice was steady, calm, but laced with warning. Relax, wash, and ignore them. The chuckles died instantly. The men in the corner went silent, their bravado evaporating under Marco's presence. I wanted to melt into the floor, but at the same time relief flooded through me. Thanks, I muttered. Barely audible over the shower spray, Marco smirked. Don't thank me. Hold on to the soap next time. It was the closest thing to a joke I'd heard from him. Later, back in the cell, the moment replayed in my mind. I sat on my bunk, towel around my shoulders, still embarrassed. I can't believe that happened, I groaned. Marco leaned back against the wall, arms crossed, watching me with faint amusement. It happens. You're not the first. Yeah, but the way they looked at me, I trailed off. My stomach twisted. It's like I'm walking around with a target on my back. He didn't answer right away. His gaze was steady, thoughtful. Finally, he said, "That's because you are. New blood always is. But targets don't last forever. Eventually, people stop caring if you prove you belong." I laughed bitterly. And how am I supposed to do that? I don't belong here. For a moment, Marco studied me. Then he surprised me by saying, "Neither did I not at first." Something in his tone was different, less guarded, almost vulnerable. But before I could ask, he deflected, reaching under his mattress for his sketch pad. "You dwell on it too much. Learn to laugh. Humor's the only weapon they don't expect." I blinked at him. "You're saying I should make jokes about dropping the soap?" His lips curved into the faintest grin. "Why not? Own it before someone else does. You laugh, they lose power over you." It was strange advice, but it stuck. The next day in the yard, one of the same men from the shower smirked at me as I passed. "Careful out here, pretty boy. Don't drop anything." The old me would have gone silent, face burning. But Marco's words echoed in my mind. Humor's the only weapon. So I forced a smile and said, "Thanks for the tip." I taped everything to my hands this morning. For a second, silence hung in the air. Then, to my surprise, the guy snorted and shook his head. His friend chuckled. The tension diffused. When I glanced back at Marco, he gave me a single approving nod. It wasn't much, but it was the first time I felt like maybe, just maybe, I wasn't entirely powerless here that night. Yes. The lights dimmed and the prison settled into its uneasy hum. I whispered across the cell, "Hey, Thanks again. For the soap thing? Marco's voice was low, almost tired. Forget it. But I didn't, because for the first time since stepping through those gates, I felt something unexpected. Not just fear, not just survival, a strange, fragile connection. The kind that begins with tension, turns into laughter, and slowly just maybe becomes something more. The days began to blur together. Routine was prison's cruelest trick. The same clang of doors, same trays of tasteless food, the same voices echoing through the halls. Time didn't move forward. It circled, trapping you in loops until you forgot what day it was. But in the middle of that endless cycle, something started to change, Marco. He wasn't just a shadow anymore, or the intimidating presence that scared others into silence. Around me, piece by piece, he let down the edges of his armor. It started small. One evening, as we sat in our cell during lockdown, I caught him sketching again. His pencil scratched softly against paper, a rhythm steady enough to drown out the noise outside. I leaned forward, curious. "What are you drawing?" He paused, clearly debating whether to show me. Then, with a half sigh, he turned the pad around. It was a bird. A raven, wings spread wide, soaring above what looked like a crumbling wall. "Wow," I whispered. "That's actually beautiful," Marco shrugged, as if embarrassed. "It's nothing. Just a habit," but it wasn't nothing. For someone who always carried himself like steel, that drawing was a window. "Why a raven?" I asked. He hesitated, then said, "They're survivors. Scavengers. People see them as bad omens, but they adapt. They always find a way." I didn't push further, but in that moment, I saw him differently, not just as the strong cellmate who protected me, but as someone who understood loneliness. The more we talked, the more I realized Marco didn't just protect me. He noticed things. When my hands shook from anxiety during meal lines, he would nudge my tray forward before anyone else noticed. When my head throbbed from the constant shouting in the yard, he'd wordlessly slide me an extra bottle of water. He never said much about it, but those quiet gestures spoke louder than words. One night, when sleep wouldn't come, I finally asked the question that had been sitting on my tongue for weeks. "Why are you here, Marco?" The silence stretched so long I thought he wouldn't answer. But then his voice came, low and rough. "Wrong place, wrong time, wrong people," he paused. "And one bad decision I'll never take back." I wanted to know more, but the weight in his tone told me not to pry. Instead, I shared something of my own. My dad stopped talking to me when I was 16, said I wasn't his son anymore. I haven't seen him since. Marco turned his head slightly, eyes catching mine in the dim light. "Because of—" I nodded. "Because of who I am?" He didn't flinch, didn't look away, just held my gaze and said softly, "That's his loss." I don't know why those words hit me so hard, but they did. My throat tightened, and for once, I didn't fight the emotion rising in me. In this cold, merciless place, someone had finally said what I'd needed to hear for years. From then on, nights became our sanctuary. While others yelled or snored or clashed in the darkness, our cell became a quiet cocoon. We told stories not just about pain, but about dreams. I confessed how I used to love the ocean, how I'd spend hours staring at waves as a kid. Wishing I could sail away and never look back, Marco told me he wanted to paint murals one day. Huge walls filled with color, so big that no one could ignore them. "I want people to look up," he said, "and remember there's more than concrete and cages." Sometimes we laughed. Sometimes we sat in silence, the weight of everything unspoken hanging between us. But always there was a current pulling us closer. One evening, I woke from a nightmare, sweat on my skin, breath ragged, heart racing. I tried to hide it, but Marco sat up instantly. "You okay?" I nodded too quickly. "Just a bad dream." Without a word, he reached across the small space and placed a hand on my shoulder, firm, steady. "You're safe," he said. It wasn't. The words that undid me was the way he said them, certain, like he meant it. And, for the first time since stepping through those gates, I actually believed it. That night, as I drifted back to sleep, I realized something had shifted. This wasn't just survival anymore. This was connection. This was trust, and maybe this was the beginning of something I never thought I'd find inside these. While something dangerously close to love, prison wasn't built for tenderness. Every corner screamed with violence. Every sound reminded you of survival. Yet somehow in the middle of that chaos, Marco and I had carved out a small piece of Quietin, island of trust, inside a sea of fear. But islands are hard to hide forever. It started with a glance. We were in the yard sitting on the cracked bleachers. The sun beat down hard, making the concrete shimmer. Around us, groups of inmates laughed, argued, traded. I kept my eyes low, but every now and then they lifted to Marco. He caught me once. His lips curved just slightly, so fast it was almost invisible. To anyone else, it was nothing. But to me, it was everything. For the rest of the day, I couldn't stop replaying that look. That night after lockdown, the silence in our cell felt different. He sat on his bunk, sketchpad balanced on his knee. I lay on mine, pretending to read an old paperback. But my eyes weren't moving across the words. "Ethan," he said suddenly. My head snapped up. "Yeah." He didn't look up from his sketching. "You keep staring at me." My stomach dropped. Heat rushed to my face. I wasn't. His pencil stilled. Slowly his eyes lifted, meeting mine across the dim space. "You were." For a long moment, the only sound was my heartbeat, loud in my ears. Then he said quieter, "It's okay." Something cracked open in my chest. The closeness grew in fragments. A brush of shoulders as we moved around the tiny cell. Hands grazing as we passed trays. Shared laughter whispered too late at night. Each moment small, almost nothing. Yet together, they built something huge, something dangerous. Because here, affection wasn't just frowned upon. It was ammunition. If anyone saw, they could use it against us. And people were starting to notice. One afternoon, while waiting in line for chow, a voice cut through the noise. "Pretty boy's got himself a bodyguard," someone sneered behind me. Or is it something more? Laughter rippled through the line. I froze. Marco's hand closed around my shoulder, steady, grounding. He didn't say a word, just turned his head. Eyes locking with the speakers. The laughter died immediately, but the damage was done. Whispers spread faster than fire in a dry field. That night I couldn't sleep. "What if they find out?" I whispered. "What if they won't?" Marco interrupted, voice calm but firm. "How can you be so sure?" He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, face half-shadowed. "Because I won't let them. But you need to trust me. Keep your head down. Don't react to their games. If we give them nothing, they'll move on." I swallowed hard. "And if we can't give them nothing?" His eyes softened in a way I'd never seen before. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached out, fingers brushing mine on the thin mattress between us. It was barely a touch. But in prison, it felt like a scream. The risk only made it worse. Or maybe better. Every hidden glance, every hushed word, every brush of skin carried a charge that left me buzzing long after. One evening after lights out, I whispered, "Marco, do you ever think about, after this, about what happens when you're free?" His silence stretched. I thought he wasn't going to answer. But then he said, "Sometimes, not often. It's easier not to hope." I bit my lip. "And if you did hope?" This time, he looked directly at me. His voice was low. It's almost dangerous in its honesty. "Then I'd hope for someone who makes this place feel less like hell." The air between us was electric. For a moment, it felt like the whole prison had gone still, like the world had shrunk down to just the two of us. I wanted to close the space, to reach for him, to do something reckless. But the sound of footsteps in the corridor jolted me back. We pulled away instantly, masks snapping back into place. Because in here, one wrong move could cost more than just trust. It could cost survival. Still lying awake. I couldn't ignore the truth anymore. This wasn't just friendship. This was something deeper. Something forbidden. Something I wanted more than I wanted freedom, and the more I wanted it, the more dangerous it became. Because in prison, secrets never stayed buried for long. Prison has a rhythm. Days blur into each other. The clang of gates, the shuffle of boots, the stink of sweat and fear. But sometimes that rhythm breaks, and when it does, everything falls apart fast. It happened in the yard. Marco and I had been working out near the pull-up bars, keeping our usual low profile. A group of guys lingered close, too close, their voices low, eyes sharp. I felt it before I heard it, that prickling sense of being hunted. One of them stepped forward. His name was Riker. Big, tattooed, in the way only someone who enjoyed cruelty could be. Well, he drawled, loud enough for everyone to hear. The lovebirds. Thought we didn't notice? The yard went still. Dozens of eyes turned. My blood ran cold. Marco's jaw tightened, but his voice stayed calm. Walk away, Riker. Riker grinned, flashing gold teeth. Or what? You'll protect your little boyfriend? Cute. Laughter broke out around us. Not friendly laughter, hungry laughter. The kind that feeds on fear. It happened fast. Riker lunged, shoving me hard. I hit the dirt, air bursting out of my lungs. Before I could scramble up, Marco was on him, fists flying, raw fury in every strike. Shouts erupted. Inmates circled like wolves around blood. Guards barked orders, but no one moved to stop it. I pushed myself up, dizzy, chest burning. Riker swung a blade, God knows where he'd hidden it, but Marco blocked it with his forearm, a red slash opening instantly. No. I screamed. Instinct took over. I grabbed a broken piece of wood near the fence and swung it at Riker's wrist. The blade clattered to the ground. Chaos exploded. By the time guards stormed in, clubs swinging, the yard was a riot. I don't remember much, just flashes, Marco's bloodied face. Riker spitting curses, hands grabbing me, forcing me to the ground. Then came the sting of pepper spray. The ringing of alarms, the crushing weight of bodies pinned down. When it ended, I was dragged to my feet, wrists shackled behind me. My throat burned, eyes streaming, chest heaving. Marco was hauled beside me, his arm still bleeding. Through swollen eyes, he looked at me. Just a glance. But it said everything. We'd crossed the line, and now the whole prison knew it. They threw us in solitary. Different cells. Cold, dark, silent. Hours or days I couldn't tell bled together. I replayed it all in my head. The fight. The blade. Marco bleeding. The look in his eyes. And the whispers before it happened. The whispers that started weeks ago. Someone had betrayed us. Someone had spread the rumors until they grew teeth. I couldn't stop thinking, who? And why? When the door finally opened, it wasn't food being slid through the slot. It was a guard, one I'd seen around, hard eyes, thin smile. You made some enemies, pretty boy, he said. Word is, Riker wasn't working alone. Someone set you up. My chest tightened. Who? He leaned closer, voice low. Find out yourself. But watch your back. Next time your boyfriend won't be there to save you. Then the door slammed shut. Days later, I was released back into general population. The moment I stepped out, eyes followed me everywhere. Some mocking, some curious, some dangerous. But I only searched for one pair. I found Marco near the showers. His arm bandaged, face bruised, but alive. Relief nearly brought me to my knees. When we finally locked eyes, he gave the smallest nod. No smile, no words, just a signal. We were still here. Still us. But the unspoken truth hung heavy between us. We weren't just two men surviving anymore. We were two men marked. And in prison, a mark could be fatal. That night, back in our cell, Marco broke the silence. They won't stop, he said. Voice low, I know. He sat on his bunk, elbows on his knees, staring at the floor. We have to be smarter, stronger. If they smell weakness, it's over. And if they come again, he finally looked at me. Then we fight. together. His words were steel, but beneath them, I heard the flicker of fear. Not fear of pain. Fear of losing me. Lying awake later, I thought about what the guard said. About betrayal. About enemies. And for the first time, I wondered if love in prison wasn't just dangerous. Maybe it was impossible. Freedom doesn't come with fanfare in prison. It comes quietly, through paperwork and signatures. Through the scrape of a cell door opening one final time. My release date had always felt like an abstract number, so far away it wasn't even real. But suddenly, there it was. Stamped, approved. "You're walking out next week," the counselor said flatly, shuffling papers on his desk. "You'll be on parole. Strict conditions. Don't screw it up." I barely heard him. My heart hammered too loud. One word echoed in my head like a prayer: free. But freedom didn't feel like freedom at first. It felt like guilt, because Marco wasn't leaving with me. He had more time years, and as the days ticked down toward my release, the weight of leaving him behind pressed harder on my chest. Every night. We lay on our bunks in silence, the air thick with everything unspoken. Finally, on my second-to-last night, Marco broke it. "You'll forget me out there," he said, voice rough, not quite steady. I sat up. "Don't you dare say that." His eyes were shadowed, unreadable. "The world moves fast, Ethan. People don't wait around for ghosts. You're not a ghost." My throat tightened. "You're the only thing that kept me alive in here." For the first time in weeks, he smiled. Not the cocky smirk he showed the yard. A real smile. Small, sad, but real. "Then promise me something," he said. "Live. Don't waste it. Don't let them keep you locked up in your head." I nodded, unable to speak, and then, in the dark, his hand found mine. Just for a moment. Just enough. Release day. The gates opened, and sunlight hit me like a slap. Too bright, too wide. Too free, I stepped outside in borrowed clothes and prison-issued shoes, clutching a plastic bag of my belongings. My heart raced as if alarms would sound and drag me back in. But no one stopped me. I was out. The world smelled different: grass, exhaust, rain on hot pavement. I wanted to laugh and cry at the same time, but then I turned. Behind the gates, through the razor wire, I knew he was in there. Watching, maybe, waiting. I lifted my hand, even if he couldn't see it. A silent promise. "I'll come back for you." The outside wasn't easy. Freedom meant bills, rules, probation check-ins. It meant people staring at me like an ex-convict first, a human second. At night, I dreamed of the yard of fights, of Marco bleeding in the dirt. I woke up gasping, sweat-soaked, feeling the cold of the cell walls still around me. And yet, freedom also meant choice. I found work at a mechanic's shop. Grease under my fingernails, the hum of engine sit grounded me. I rented a room in a rundown building where the pipes rattled and the neighbors fought through thin walls. But it was mine, my space, and slowly, I began to write letters every week. Without fail, I wrote to Marco, sometimes long, spilling everything: my fears, my struggles, my memories of us. Sometimes short, just a few words. "Still here?" "Still yours," he wrote back. His handwriting was jagged, but the words burned steady. "Don't stop living. I miss your laugh. One day I'll see the sky with you again." Years passed. The world kept changing. I kept moving forward, carrying him with me. And then 5 years later, my phone rang, a number I didn't recognize. A voice I'd never forgotten. "Ethan." I froze, heart slamming. "Marco." On the other end, silence stretched. Then a breath, shaky, almost disbelieving. "I'm out." The reunion wasn't cinematic. No running embrace at an airport, no dramatic music. It was a quiet meeting on a street corner under a flickering lamppost. He looked older, thinner, more lines around his eyes. But when he smiled, it was him. The same man who once told me to fight, to live. And I realized something in that moment. Prison had tried to break us. The walls, the violence, the fear, they'd all tried. But we'd made it here. Scarred, yes. Changed, yes, but still standing. Together, we walked through the city that night, talking until dawn. About everything, about nothing. About life outside the walls, about the years we'd lost and the years we still had. When the sun rose, painting the world gold, he looked at me with that same quiet fire I first saw in the cell. So, he said, "Still mine?" I smiled. Always. And for the first time in a long time, I believed it. The story of Ethan and Marco wasn't just about surviving prison walls, it was about surviving themselves. They had endured fear, violence, loneliness, and loss. But in the end, they carried each other through the darkest years. Outside those iron bars, life wasn't perfect, but it was real. Every sunrise felt like a victory. Every step forward like a rebellion against the years stolen from them. They weren't the same men who first crossed paths in that cell. They were stronger, wiser, scarred, but unbroken. And as they stood together beneath the open sky, one truth remained clear. Love could survive bars. It could outlast silence. It could wait. Ethan squeezed Marco's hand and whispered the words that had carried him through every lonely night. "We're free, together." And for the first time, it truly felt true.